Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our Insight 2011 webinar series. James Plimpton will be presenting today's webinar, Leveraging Core 8, specifically focusing on the new features and enhancements in Core 8. We are happy to answer any questions on or offline, depending on the nature of the question, following James's presentation. So please type your questions into the chat box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar panel that you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. And as I said, we will be monitoring that during the presentation and happy to answer a couple of those questions, if possible, after James's discussion. And with that, I'll turn things over to James.
Okay, thank you very much. As Gina mentioned, today we're going to walk through a short webinar on leveraging the Core 8 release that just came out within about the last 2 weeks. So those of you that haven't had a chance to download and utilize the product or to evaluate it, you'll get a chance here in about a maybe 20-25 minute presentation to see some of the changes in the Core 8 product. So that's the focus of the event today. And as Gina said, please feel free to ask questions. Just type those into the question box and we'll take care of those at the end. Okay. First, to kind of position the Core 8 product in our family of products, those of you that may not be familiar with Vitek, we know Core has been around, with the companies for almost 20 years. This is the first time we've actually branched into a second software product. This also released about 10 days ago, and that's the Genesis product. So while this webinar won't cover the Genesis product, you can see those in other sessions or ask anyone at Vitek for some assistance in walking through that product. But we now have 2 products that we carry, and Genesis will be a future implementation of our model-based system engineering approach, while Core is a product that many of you know, and those of you that haven't will get a chance to see today. You also see Strata on here. This is our productized model-based system engineering approach. It comes down to doing engineering in layers. So again, if Strata is not familiar to you, you can pull off our system engineering primer, or again, contact anyone at Vitek to see more detail on that. But today, again, we're going to focus on simply the Core 8 product. We won't touch on the other 2 items. With that, we're going to walk through the Core 8 release through some charts here. We're going to walk through some of the new features, show you some of the new diagrams, and be happy to take your questions. Okay, before we get started with that, again, those of you familiar with Vitek and specifically our model-based system engineering approach know that for almost 20 years it's been our goal to get from that traditional document-driven system engineering approach over to a very visual, very model-driven framework. And you've seen that in the Core product over the years. You'll see that in the Genesis product. You'll see that in even a model-based system engineering approach outside of Vitek, where the greater system engineering community is heading. But it really, the notion is to get away from just document-driven materials, just text and paragraphs, and over to where models get included with some of the obvious text that you have to submit to your customer, perhaps your stakeholder, because models provide that visualization, that ease of communication, and they're really unambiguous. And so we've always been working towards that end where you can work in that model-based approach or that document-driven approach and go back and forth. And of course, at the end of the effort or anytime during, produce the documents that you need for your customer that include the paragraphs and text that you are expected to produce, but also with the diagrams as well that help the communication. And so you're going to see in this Core 8 release that we've really focused on that piece of it. Core has had a number of years of maturity. It's gotten system engineering and model-based system engineering down tight. What we've done is we've taken this release and really expanded that ability to communicate the information in Core to your stakeholders, to your customers, to your partners. So it's about the engineering, but in this release, the emphasis has really been about the production of that material and delivering it to someone else where it can be just as meaningful as it is to the engineer. Okay. And again, the 4 areas that we tend to cover in the product as classified by Encosi would be the requirements piece, the behavior piece, the architecture piece, and the verification and validation piece, or test and evaluation. Of course, Core integrates all of those through its single database, single repository, and you can see some of the views here that we help use to communicate the system engineering model that we're working through. And you can already see some of the changes if you know Core. Down in the architecture piece, you'll see here some things that are very different than what have appeared in the past. And again, we're still working in these same domains. We haven't stretched Core into different engineering areas. What we've done is we really enable the engineer to share with more people the engineering that results from Core. Okay, we're going to break this into a few sections. The first will be called expanding the model. And again, we have a schema inside of core. For those of you, again, that don't know core, schema is the framework, the engineering language that the tool uses to capture your information. So we have, in a very kind of a Windows-centric approach, we have folders for components and requirements and functions and things of that sort. With every release, we tend to make small modifications to it, things that are customer-driven, things that are driven by our engineers, things that we've come across over time that we need to adjust slightly or account for in the schema moving forward. And Core 8 has a few changes, and you can see some of those here in the change management piece, test and evaluation piece, program management piece. I'm not going to cover the details here, but note that Core 8 does have a few slight changes to it. So if you're a Core user and you want to migrate from 7 to 8, you can do that. And the schema will, there's a migration utility that will help you move from the current schema in 7 to the updated schema in 8. If you made changes on your own and decide you want to keep your current schema, you can still open things inside of Core 8 using a Core 7 schema, and therefore take advantage of all the features I'm going to show you without really tampering with anything that will be affected by schema changes. So again, if there's any questions on those sort of things, which will be important to some people, reach out to support or one of the account executives you work with or one of the engineers, and we'll be happy to help you through that. Some of the things you're going to see when you open Core 8, the left side pane of our framework where you can really see the schema come alive has changed a bit. You're going to see things on here we'll talk about in a little more detail later in this webinar, but if you're running Core 8 now, or if you've just installed it, you're going to notice there are things such as the model assistant. You'll see packages, and you'll see a new layout for the different facilities, and then something up here that where the old facilities block used to be, we now talk about perspectives. And we'll get to each of those, but you're going to see a few changes right off the bat. So if you just downloaded Core and you're using this webinar to kind of get you familiar with it, just take note that some of the key schema items on the left side have changed. Okay, some of the diagrams that we've updated inside of Core, or actually the utility of some of the diagrams, we've gone to a drag drop model. And those of you that have used Core over time know that you can do things through right-clicking and through some buttons at the top and some menu drop-downs. Well, we've now added drag and drop onto the diagrams. And that seems like it would be a pretty simple update or change, but it's taken us, well, we're on release 8, it's taken us a number of years to get here. It's a little bit different though. If you think about it in context of Core, when you're dragging things onto a screen or dragging from one to another, you're actually building relationships. Core is all about that traceability and tying the information in the database together, so you're not working as you might in PowerPoint or some other graphical tool where you can easily just drop blocks on a screen and carry on. You know, when you move things onto the screen from this pane over here and drag an item over onto a branch, you're actually creating that relationship inside of the database. So it takes a little while to get that to where we wanted it to. But you'll see now throughout all the different diagrams in Core, we support drag and drop, and that is not only on a given diagram, but even between diagrams. So between the data structure here, you can see visually, and over to the diagram, when you drop one from one to another, it'll create that relationship for you. So some of the utilities, some of the user enhancement, the features that people have asked for, we've been able to put in this release, and that's one that people have asked for a while. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that drag drop feature. And that's not just items, that's constructs and all sorts of things you can see right here when you're actually doing that. Okay. Other changes that seem small, but if you're, again, a Core user, you'll note that the graphics come out about this size right out of the box. And you often get text like here, you can see provide product to customer. Well, that's obviously cut off. To change that, you'd have to go into the template for that icon or for the class and expand that by increasing the pixel width and height. Well, now, of course, there's drag and drop. There's resize to fit. So you can grab one of the corners and drag it vertically or horizontally to stretch those out. Lots of little features you'll find inside of Core in terms of the sizing of icons. There's features that you can have all these icons stretch and represent themselves at the same size as this one, or a select few. You can clear one or clear all and go back to a standard size. So there's lots of little features in there you'll find through the button menu and through kind of a right-click menu as well. But that's now supported in the product as well. Okay. The model visualization, we've had SysML in release 7. We've added more to it in Core 8. And one of the things we've added in Core 8 is a feature we've taken from the SysML community, and that's alighting. So those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a It's a fancy way of saying we can hide information on the screen. It doesn't affect the model. It doesn't affect the data. What it does affect is just the representation. And that's been a request because we often have models that are excessively large, at least maybe not in the engineer's terms, but to turn around and present those to somebody else, they get very complicated very quickly. And so with the Align feature and a series of menu buttons at the top that you can explore, you can go ahead and mark items, and you can remove them from view. You can see there's 4 different types of labels. You can take a look at this model as it stands in a standard view. You can mark those, which is this dotted outline, which effectively shows you what could be hidden with another click of a button, and you can go ahead and hide it. And you can hide it with the word elided here, which is considered the label, or without the label. So depending on who you're presenting to, you've got a number of different options to hide the information. Again, it doesn't change the nature of the model. It's just how you're representing the model to somebody else. Same thing with the icons themselves. For years, we've had the ability to go in here and change these settings on the icon, the width and the height. And if you want to get into it, you can start organizing the structure. Maybe you don't want the number at the top. Maybe you want more lines here for the middle or some different item across the bottom. You had control over that. Well, now you get some standard features that you would find on any other block of text in the tool, bolding and italicized and underlining, things of that sort. So you have even more control of the way those look. And here in a little while, you'll see some of the effect that can have on a diagram where you can make those changes to it and make it that much more presentable. Here you can see some of the things you can do to the text on a diagram, bold, italic, font color, things of that sort. Again, you'll see some of this here on some of the diagrams we show momentarily. And here you do. Here you see the first one. There's also some features we've added, and one would be how you can group or collect information on a screen. In this case, we've added kind of a yellow box to highlight the actual system under development right now, and you can see some of the externals as well. And you can see how we've colored those and how the links represent themselves. But you now have the ability to do some of these things in diagrams very easily to make those changes to it. Okay. This is one of the more asked for features in the product, and happy to say that we've been able to now allow you to include graphics into the product. You can see the difference that makes. Here's a core model at the top, and if you can read the text, you can see it's just a little process here. Very standard core block, core diagram layout here with a trigger as well, and you can see how you can change that inside a core. And this is direct from core. These graphics, however, are our own custom graphics that we've utilized from elsewhere. There is a library of graphics you can use, but this representation does live in core. You can see the frame around it. This wasn't done afterwards. So you can now replace these blocks with your graphics or graphics from the database and get this sort of result. So for those that have asked for ships and aircraft and tanks and storage tanks and whatnot over the years, you can now do that in the tool. Okay. With that, there are a couple notes. You can use bitmaps, JPEGs, or PNGs. There is a library inside of the tool. As I mentioned, there's over 3,000 images that you can work through and choose what you might want from the product, or again, use your own custom graphics. So you can do all sorts of things on here. We've had people drop watermarks behind it. You can add graphics to not just, let me jump back here, to not just the actual icons as well, but you can drop graphics into the middle of the diagram. You know, if there's something you want to represent out here, and that goes for items and things as well. So you're not really limited as to what you can do with it. You're just seeing one example here. Okay. And again, as we mentioned, this release is really tailored towards that forwarding of information, that presentation of information to other people and other stakeholders. And you can see on some of the drop downs here, some of the items that you can now utilize when you're working that model and working that presentation, formatting, alignment, sizing, using different images versus what's provided, auto sizing things. So just a couple snapshots of some of the menu items that you can utilize as you start to work these models. And again, you can get some of these shortcuts from Core 8 itself, but here's a quick look at some of the buttons you have by default on the screen when you're running Core 8. And you can see some of the, again, the real emphasis on presentation in this release. Okay, and again, we've taken time to expand some of the representations. if you've been a core user over the years, you'll know that Core 7 added a number of diagrams to the product, a lot of the SysML diagrams, and Core 8 is going to continue that. You're seeing things here such as a physical context diagram with the components and the links represented. We also offer spider diagrams now, and this is not truly a replacement for the entity relationship diagram, but the entity relationship diagram is now hidden unless you choose to turn it on, and the spider diagram sort of takes its place on the menu selection down there at the bottom of some of the different views, such as the functional piece or the component piece. You can see you've got the element under interrogation in the middle, and you can walk a set of relationships to pull all those things that are related to it. You can see this one happens to show refined by and basis of, and so you're going a couple layers deep. Okay. For the spider diagram, you also have control over the diagrams. You can grab these boxes and move them around to where you like. Again, you can modify the size and color and look and feel those icons as well, or drop in your own graphics. But the spider diagram is a very, very cool way to quickly grab context for the item that you're looking at. Okay. Another piece of the presentation that we've included in Core 8 is the way we represent the information. So you're very used to, if you use Core and have gone through a lot of the hierarchies in the tool, a very vertical presentation in this style right here. This is very classical Core. You can now represent that information differently. You can see all the different options here. There's an org chart style, which is a little more compact. Hanging, horizontal, right to left. You see the different options, including the upward tree, if that's what you prefer. So again, you can move all of these things around, at least on the radial, circular, and upward tree, but you're starting from a whole different perspective than we've offered in the past. And you have total control over that with the views inside of Core. Okay. A couple of things we've done in terms of data management inside of Core 8 that we haven't had before. The first would be packaging. And you can see here in this snapshot here, you see right under the database, the first thing you start off with are the different packages. Actually, when you open Core, this is empty, and you can create your own packages for the data inside of the tool. You'll find that the packages can be used for any number of things. One thing I've done on a model, it was a model that included a lot of IT components. There were some requirements for IT, there were some computers involved, there were some network issues that were under their control, and some issues and concerns that also would affect IT. So I created a package for IT and dragged all those information pieces into it. So you can see, you can see that when you create a package, and you can see this particular package in the sample, there are different classes in here. So really what you're doing is you're organizing data from any different class and labeling it. And so you can still work from here, just like anywhere else in Core. If I click on this function and make changes, it affects that function everywhere. This is a grouping. It's a cross-class grouping that has some pertinence to a group or a team or a type of information. And so you can see some integrated product teams may have different focal points, and you can start grouping that information together. So it's a quick way to kind of categorize and assess different parts of your system. We've also added perspectives, and this takes the presentation of information we've talked about going outside of Core and brings some of that inside the tool as well. So by default, we start with full detail on the menu bar. This used to be where the facilities lived, and now that the facilities are over in their own drop-down selection, their expansion selection over on the left side, we've replaced that with this perspective view. What you can do here, by default, there are 3 or 4 different perspectives you can choose from, where you can create your own. You can sort of see here on the graphic, there's full detail and there's minimalist. And you can see the difference in information. The full detail has the entire set of relationships. The minimalist has fewer, and the attributes as well. You can see here, as you recognize from Core, there's document PUID and things of that sort. Some real rich levels of detail in the attribute column that maybe someone doesn't need to see. Maybe they're coming from a management perspective and they just want to get in for a few minutes and read the description on an item or an element and not really have to sort through all the different attributes to understand what's what. And if they come in here and they're turned on to the minimalist view, that is removed from their site. They can always expand back and move to it if you so choose, but they get this filtered view of the information in the tool. So the idea is that you can share this with different people with different backgrounds on the team and not have them really get encumbered with the engineering that you all may choose to use day in and day out. Okay. We also have a parser in the tool, a little bit easier to use than in the past. If you've gotten into it, you know that from the report dropdown, there were parsers available in core. They took a little time to set up. Oftentimes we come in and do a little setup for the user. Well, now we've got some very easy parsers. You can see there's a button on the menu bar, very much like the extractor, but it will walk through and you can pull things out. You know, here's keywords you can use and shalls and things of that sort. So if you're using .toc, you can go ahead and parse those right into the tool. Very easy to set up and use, unlike the parsers we've had in the past. So hopefully those of you that have documents, especially a number of short documents where that may differ a little bit, you want to get into and pull this information in quickly, you can do that in core now. Okay. There's also something we've added in Core 8 that we will certainly expand on in future versions of Core, or the Genesis product rather, and that's called a model assistant. And you can see there's 5 different blocks here that by default are on when you create a new database that you have control over and can turn off. I won't get into each one of these. You can go ahead and again connect with someone at Vitech or myself later if you'd like to understand more about it. But for example, I'll pick one of these, and that would be auto create root function. So when you create a component in Core, there's generally an assumption that there is behavior associated with that component, and so Core will automatically create kind of that shell or that root function for you to work from. So you can see if you create something, an example here is ABC, maybe the name of a component, Core will automatically create an underscored perform ABC function. So you can go in there and define that behavior at a later time. You can certainly delete it, change it, rename it. You don't have to use it. You can even take this checkbox off. But for a lot of folks that are getting into Core, getting into model-based system engineering, there's some things that are very helpful that we were trying to put out there for those users to take advantage of that weren't there before. And again, you have control over this. A lot of people may not choose to use it, but as we're working through this, we expect to increase this this assistance downstream. So look for more of that in the future as well. Okay. And finally, our last section here, we'll get into some of the reporting pieces. One thing you'll see is that you've got a series of report menus now where you have most of the questions on one screen. You can see that before, if you are familiar with running some of the reports in Core, you might get prompted question after question after question before you actually ran the report. In Core now, a lot of the menus have this where they're now consolidated, so you can walk down and answer some of those questions on one screen as you're making the modifications. The other thing you can do with the report would be to make your selections. For example, a system description document, one of the questions would be, what views do you wish to show in this report? And you can go ahead and select maybe 4 or 5 or 6 views, whatever you like, and go ahead and run the report. When you went back to run that report in the future, you'd have to pick those selections again. And perhaps you're running that same report every week. You know, it would be fairly easy to forget one of those views from week to week. Well, Core now allows you to go ahead and the first time you run the report, you select those views. And the next time you go back to run it, it'll have those views already over here in the selected diagram side for you. So you can obviously remove some of those or add new ones. But if you want to run that same report every week, it's going to remember that for you and keep that at the ready. Along with that are scheduling reports. So you can see you have that ability now. You can run it login or specific times, or here you can run it every so often. So that's a new feature to the product as well. And finally, one of the things we've added to diagrams for representation would be the optional display of resources on the diagram. So those of you that, again, have these complex diagrams and you might forget which functions are utilizing a given resource. Maybe it's, fuel or computing power or, ammunition of some sort. You've got, a fairly robust diagram and you've got multiple functions pulling on the same resource. Well, here you can now choose to display that. I can see here, I can see MIPS and exactly which functions are using those. So that gives me some greater control over what's really happening in my model. If I find that's too complex or there are too many resources that it sort of encumbers my visualization, I can shut those off. Again, it won't affect anything to turn it on or turn it off. It's just giving me another option to see a little more detail in the diagram. Okay, that's just a quick walkthrough. Again, if anyone would like any more detail, we'd be happy to set up demonstrations and at a later date. You can get back to me or to Gina or anyone at the company. So, Gina?
Thanks, James. That was great. I think there was one question that I know we have Bethany on the line with us as well, so perhaps one of you would be able to help answer the question. A little while back in the presentation, someone had asked if there was any visual cue that would let an engineer know that data has been hidden.
Well, when you're the user working the actual diagram, you have that ability to mark or elide or hide things. I don't know that there's any visual cue if you were to step away and come back and then see that the information that you may have elided is actually elided at the time. You can toggle that off and on so you can see everything just to double check. But Bethany, unless you have another answer, I don't think there's any specific way it's going to flag and tell you on screen that you've had information hidden from view.
Actually, there is a way, and it depends on how you set it. When you elide content, there is an option, there's a little icon that allows you to define how you want it to be. So there's a marked option which just outlines the icon with a dotted line. So you know that, hey, I intend to elide this, but I've not done so yet. Another one is hidden with label, and it makes that element disappear. But in the upper right-hand corner of the diagram, it's going to say elided to let you know that you've done that. And then there's another setting, which you should use with caution, which completely hides it and doesn't give you any visual cues. So as I said, there's an icon that allows you to make that setting.
Right, and I drew that as the question, Bethany, the last one. Once someone at that computer has chosen to hide it without marking it, there's no other way to walk up and realize that information's been hidden unless you decide to turn everything back on.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions for now?
No, I think that's it. The others that I've seen come in, we'd be happy to help answer offline. So thanks, everyone. Thanks very much, James, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We hope to see you back here next week.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.